In a quiet household years ago, an unusual child was born, a boy who, from his very first breath, exhibited a profound and unsettling silence. He never cried, not during his birth, not when hungry, not when startled, not when in pain. His parents, initially charmed by his serene demeanor, grew increasingly concerned as the weeks and months passed. They conducted gentle experiments, inviting jovial relatives to make silly faces and loud noises, but the infant merely stared back with wide, impassive eyes, his tiny face a placid mask. They consulted a succession of doctors, fearing he might be mute or afflicted with some deeper, inscrutable neurological condition, but every test returned with no discernible physical cause. A shadow of quiet despair began to settle over the family, a creeping fear that their son was somehow detached from the very essence of human emotion, that a vital thread connecting him to the world had been severed at birth. Then one seemingly ordinary afternoon, a neighbor paid a visit, cradling her own infant daughter. As the woman drew near the silent boy's crib, a remarkable and inexplicable transformation occurred. The moment his deep, observant gaze fell upon the little girl's sleeping face, a tremor passed through his small frame. His tiny brow furrowed, his lips trembled, and then, breaking a lifetime of quietude, he released a loud, healthy, soul-piercing wail. It was a sound not of distress, but of profound awakening, as if her presence had flipped a switch to a part of his soul previously shrouded in darkness. His mother, witnessing this miracle, wept tears of joyous relief, her heart overflowing with a love now mixed with awe. In that instant, she perceived not a coincidence, but an invisible, sacred thread connecting the two children, as if this girl held the key to her son's emotional world. Moved by this mysterious bond and by the neighbor's own difficult, impoverished circumstances, the boy's mother made a fateful, compassionate decision. She would adopt the little girl. From that day forward, the two children's destinies were irrevocably woven together into a single, intertwined narrative, their lives becoming two melodies destined to harmonize. Years flowed by like a steady stream, and the children grew into adolescence, manifesting in strikingly divergent ways that only highlighted their unique connection. The boy, named Lang Cha, possessed a sharp, analytical mind that shone brilliantly in academic settings, his intellect a precise and powerful engine. His intelligence was so pronounced and voracious that he skipped a grade, placing him among older, often less insightful peers. His adoptive sister, Xiao, however, walked a different, sun-dappled path. Academically, she perpetually hovered near the bottom of her class, her strengths lying not in textbooks and theorems, but in a boundless, if sometimes clumsy, warmth, a fierce loyalty, and an intuitive understanding of people's hearts. They were a living study in contrasts. He, the composed, revered, and slightly distant top student; she, the bubbly, well-known, universally liked underperformer whose laughter could light up a room. A current of adolescent intrigue and manufactured fear ran through their school in the form of whispered rumors about a shadowy group known only as Green Leaf. This mysterious clique was said to orchestrate minor acts of mischief and psychological intimidation against other students. Lockers left slightly ajar, belongings subtly displaced, anonymous notes, always leaving behind their chilling botanical calling card. 3 vibrant green leaves arranged in a deliberate, isosceles triangle at the scene. The tales of Green Leaf became campfire stories for the digital age, thrilling and terrifying the student body in equal measure, a shared folklore that bound them in collective anxiety. It was after sharing one such spooky story, huddled in a corner of the schoolyard, that Xiao's best friend Juan sought solace in the glowing screen of her phone, scrolling through photos of her favorite K-pop idol, a strictly forbidden act during school hours. The homeroom teacher, a hawk-eyed disciplinarian with a zero-tolerance policy for distractions, caught her immediately. With a grimace of disappointment, he confiscated the device, declaring it held hostage in his desk drawer until after the critical final exams, a lifetime away for a teenager. Seeing Juan's profound dejection, the light utterly gone from her eyes, Xiao's empathetic heart overruled all practical judgment. In a gesture of pure, selfless friendship, she pressed her own phone into Juan's hand, unknowingly setting in motion a Rube Goldberg machine of chaotic events. This simple act of kindness created a critical communication gap with seismic consequences. Later that day, Lang Cha, ever the protective older brother figure, sent Xiao a text telling her not to wait for him after school, as he had a sudden meeting with a teacher. The message, however, landed silently on her phone, which was now buzzing obliviously in Juan's pocket. Oblivious and operating on their well-established routine, Xiao finished her classes and headed for their usual meeting spot under the old oak tree. What she found there turned her blood to ice and her stomach into a knot of dread. Lang Cha's familiar bicycle lay discarded on its side like a fallen soldier, and nearby, ominous, rust-colored splatters stained the gray pavement. But the most terrifying detail, the one that confirmed her worst fears, was the trio of waxy green leaves placed neatly, almost artistically, beside the scene, the unmistakable whispered signature of the rumored troublemakers. Visceral, paralyzing fear, cold and absolute gripped Xiao. Visions of Lang Cha being ambushed, cornered, and hurt by the shadowy green leaf group flooded her mind in a nauseating cascade. Panic, a more powerful master than reason, took hold. She jumped on her bike and pedaled frantically through the winding neighborhood streets, her heart hammering against her ribs, her eyes scanning every dim alley, every quiet park bench, every hidden doorway for any sign of him. Her frantic, zigzagging search led her past a brightly lit bubble tea shop, its neon sign a blur in her peripheral vision. Here, her path was suddenly blocked by three unfamiliar boys, their postures loose and their smiles containing a casual, slightly intimidating edge. They loomed, offering, or perhaps in the parlance of teenage boys, demanding that she join them to take advantage of a buy three get one free promotional deal celebrating the start of autumn. As the last of the daylight bled from the sky and Xiao failed to return home, a different kind of worry, cold and sharp, settled in Lang Cha's chest. He had gone to their meeting spot, found his bike where he'd hastily left it after fixing a flat tire, the red liquid was merely spilled cherry soda, and saw the leaves left by a gardening class. Putting the pieces together with terrifying speed, he set out to find her. He arrived at the scene by the bubble tea shop just in time to see his sister seemingly cornered by the trio. A protective rage, fierce and primal, surged through him, burning away his usual calm. Without a second thought, his fingers closing around a rough, loose brick from a nearby construction pile, he prepared to intervene with brute, desperate force. Lang Cha, Xiao's voice, sharp with recognition and a hint of embarrassment, cut through the thickening tension like a knife. The reality, once obscured by fear and poor lighting, snapped into focus. She wasn't being harassed by malevolent strangers. These were the very boys from the bubble tea shop, their social invitation perhaps clumsily delivered and horribly misconstrued. Lang Cha halted, the brick feeling suddenly heavy, foolish, and grotesque in his hand. He let it drop with a dull thud, letting out a sigh of profound frustration, directed at the entire absurd situation, at Xiao's reckless worry, and most acutely at his own impulsive, violent instinct. To smooth the profoundly awkward encounter, he stepped forward, his voice stiff but polite. He offered a formal apology on Xiao's behalf and paid for their drinks, a financial peace offering that dissipated the remaining tension. The groups parted ways, the strange moment dissolving into a series of polite, if strained, smiles and nods. Ever the compassionate soul, Xiao, perhaps feeling guilty for the misunderstanding, even gave the boys her only umbrella as they left, a gesture of such pure goodwill that it meant she and Lang Cha had to sprint the remaining blocks home through a sudden, chilly downpour, arriving at their doorstep soaked to the skin and shivering like two half-drowned kittens. As they dripped onto her welcome mat, Lang Cha, his voice gentler now but laced with a residual tremor from his earlier fury, admonished her. "If something strange ever happens again," he said, wringing out his sleeve, "you go straight home, you call me. You don't launch a one-girl rescue mission into the night." Xiao, however, squared her shoulders, water plastering her hair to her forehead, her expression fierce with an unshakable loyalty. "I will always come to protect you," she declared, as if stating a fundamental law of the universe. The simple, unwavering conviction in her words, spoken through chattering teeth, made Lang Cha's heart perform a peculiar, fluttering somersault in his chest. He could only offer a helpless, breathless smile, masking the swell of confusing emotion with a familiar, brotherly tease. "We're destined partners, you and I," he said softly, almost to himself. "If I ever lost you, my mother would probably kill me, and then where would I be?" Xiao playfully swatted his arm, telling him not to say such ominous things, and handed him a dry towel. In that quiet, damp moment, standing in the pool of light from the hallway as he dried his hair and their eyes met over the soft fabric, the air between them seemed to shimmer and thicken with unspoken, nascent feeling. Lang Cha realized, with a clarity that was both thrilling and terrifying, that his feelings for the girl he had grown up alongside, the sister of his heart, had quietly, irrevocably, seismically shifted. The bond that began with his first cry was evolving, maturing into a profound and different kind of attachment. Xiao, meanwhile, was experiencing a rare and intoxicating moment of school-sanctioned pride. After yet another disastrous midterm performance that sent her own biological mother into a table-slamming, roof-raising fury, their homeroom teacher, in a fit of democratic exasperation, decided to assign class officer roles not by merit, but by lottery. In a twist of absurd, cosmic fate, the portly, kind-hearted student who perpetually ranked last in every subject was drawn as the study committee member, sending the entire class into a stunned, disbelieving silence. Xiao was still giggling helplessly at this when her own name was pulled from the box. She was announced as the new labor committee member. She swelled with an official, weighty sense of importance, her chest puffing out. This newfound authority was immediately tested when Lang Cha, in his capacity as a senior hygiene inspector, arrived for a routine cleanliness check of the sophomore classrooms. She tried to brush off his authority with a dismissive wave, but a quick-thinking senior girl deftly mediated. Lang Cha, however, was all detached, bureaucratic business. He pointed a stern finger not at the floor but upwards to a garish pink plastic bag caught like a sad flag in the branches of the courtyard tree, a clear violation of environmental aesthetics and school rules. Eager to prove her worth and defend her class's honor, Xiao insisted on retrieving it herself. With a running start, she made a clumsy leap, managed to dislodge the bag with a stick, only to slip on the wet grass, fall in a spectacular limsakimbo arc and land with a decisive thud, simultaneously ripping a large, mortifying hole in the seat of her school uniform pants. As a group of nearby boys began to snicker and point, Lang Cha moved with instinctive, blinding speed. In one fluid motion, he shrugged out of his uniform jacket, wrapped it securely around her waist, and with a hand on her elbow, swiftly guided her away from the scene of humiliation, his silent, efficient actions speaking volumes more than any comforting words ever could. At home, excitedly recounting her heroic achievement to her mother, Xiao's pride unfortunately manifested as unsolicited criticism of her mother's potato-peeling technique. This led to her being unceremoniously, and with culinary finality, banished from the kitchen. She naturally drifted, as she always did, to her foster mother's warm, welcoming house for dinner. There, her newfound officiousness led her to conduct a surprise inspection of Lang Cha's famously, almost unnervingly, tidy room. Peering under his meticulously made bed, her eye caught not dust but a familiar, slightly battered old cardboard box, a repository for childhood treasures she had given him years ago. His flustered reaction, a slight panicked intake of breath and a step forward, piqued her mischievous curiosity. Against his weak protest, she tugged the box free and lifted the lid. Inside, she found not old marbles or faded drawings but a delicate, obviously feminine dress folded with care. An awkward electric silence filled the room, thick enough to slice. It was broken only by her foster mother's cheerful, oblivious offer of sliced fruit from the hallway. Seizing the opportunity for leverage and mischief, Xiao flashed a triumphant, fox-like grin. She now held the perfect blackmail material. She would keep his secret about this mysterious, sentimental garment if he helped her execute a daring, foolhardy plan to break into the teacher's locked office and retrieve Juan's confiscated phone. As they conspired in hushed, nervous tones over a diagram of the staff hallway, they were unexpectedly joined by Zihan, a serious, intensely academic and perpetually frowning classmate who ranked just below Lang Cha on the academic ladder. Xiao, believing in strength in numbers, impulsively and recklessly recruited him into their scheme. The trio's nervous, whispered plotting was catastrophically interrupted by the sudden, calm, and utterly terrifying presence of the very homeroom teacher they intended to rob, who had somehow materialized in the doorway. Panic paralyzed Xiao and Zihan, their minds going blank. But Lang Cha's quick thinking, born of a lifetime of getting Xiao out of scrapes, saved the day. He smoothly stepped forward, pretended to have just found a wad of lost cash on the floor, and handed it to the teacher with a picture of innocent concern, before making a calm, unhurried exit as if he had merely been reporting a minor issue. Xiao and Zihan, attempting to mimic his masterful nonchalance, merely stammered and shuffled their feet and were instantly called back and exposed. The consequence was severe and very public. All three were stripped of their fledgling class officer positions and sentenced to run a soul-crushing, endless number of laps around the vast school athletic field under the pitiless afternoon sun. Exhausted, humiliated, and drenched in sweat, Xiao returned home only to face her biological mother's teasing comparison to a bedraggled stray cat. As a peace offering to her offended foster family for the trouble she'd undoubtedly caused, she was forced to deliver a heavy bag of apples as a gesture of apology. Reluctantly completing the errand, she was about to flee the scene when Lang Cha stopped her with a quiet call of her name. From his school bag he produced, like a magician, Juan's phone. Xiao's eyes lit up with a mix of shock, elation, and overwhelming gratitude. A brief, playful tussle ensued as she lunged for it, but he held it easily above her reach, a faint smile touching his lips. Quickly changing tactics, she switched on a full-scale charm offensive, batting her eyelashes with exaggerated flair. Lang Cha, utterly amused and helpless in the face of her antics, simply sat down at his desk and pointed to the notebook before him. He was in the middle of writing a lengthy, punitive self-reflection essay. He revealed the truth. To get the phone back, he had gone to the teacher alone, concocting a lie that the phone was his own lost property, and was now paying the price for his dishonesty with this 1,000-word exercise in contrition. It was a poignant, quiet moment, evidence that even the brilliant, perpetually composed Lang Cha was not immune to committing foolish, heartfelt, and self-sacrificing acts for the person who held his heart. Dynamics of Xiao's classroom life underwent another forced shift when she and her partner in crime, Juan, were forcibly separated by the teacher for excessive chatting. Juan was placed beside the stern, intimidating and impeccably dressed class monitor, whose aura of severity was so potent it rendered the normally chatty girl utterly, blessedly silent. Xiao meanwhile found herself seated next to Zihan, who spent the entire first lesson sighing morosely as if carrying the weight of the world. He eventually confessed his frustration at being placed near lower-performing students, though he couldn't resist adding with a smug glance that Xiao's particular presence wouldn't threaten his top 5 ranking. His real lament, he admitted, his competitive spirit deflating, was that his arch-rival Lang Cha had been moved to an advanced class, leaving him without a worthy competitor to drive him, a rival whose shadow gave his own achievements meaning. This academic rivalry, however, was subtly beginning to take a personal and more complicated turn. A series of comical, intimate, and accidentally revealing moments further tangled the web of their relationships. In a classic parental mix-up, Lang Cha opened a beautifully wrapped gift from his mother to find, to his acute horror, a lace-trimmed set of Xiao's underwear accidentally packed inside, a result of a shopping trip where his foster mother had bought a cute outfit for Xiao and something more elegant for herself. The mix-up led to a flustered, red-faced confrontation at school and much relentless, merciless teasing from a delighted Xiao. During the annual school sports events, a stray basketball thrown with careless force flew from a senior game and struck Xiao squarely, knocking her unconscious on the grass. The sight of her lying so still, so pale, unlocked a ferocious, previously hidden side of Lang Cha. Ignoring the mumbled, insincere apology from the senior who had thrown the ball, he stormed onto the basketball court with a terrifying, single-minded intensity. He didn't just play, he dominated, his movements fueled by a raw, protective fury, playing not for points but as a physical outlet for the fear and rage that had gripped him. Watching him from the sidelines, a bandage on her forehead, Xiao saw not just her childhood friend but a young man capable of formidable, focused strength, a protector in truth. More serious, adult Shadow entered Lang Cha's carefully ordered life when his mother, with a hesitant, almost guilty expression, revealed she wanted to introduce him to a man. Lang Cha's mind instantly flashed back to a glimpse days earlier, seeing his mother get into a sleek, unfamiliar sedan, a soft smile on her face he hadn't seen in years. His heart clenched, but he agreed to the meeting, his primary wish being her happiness after all the years of quiet struggle he had witnessed. The encounter was a seismic shock. The man was not a new suitor but Lang Cha's own biological father, Luang, a ghost from their past who had abandoned them when Lang Cha was a toddler and had now returned, remade as a successful, polished entrepreneur. For Lang Cha, this was not a joyous family reunion but the violent reopening of an old, festering wound. The man in the expensive suit was a stranger. The title father was a word that had long ago turned to bitter ash in his mouth, associated only with absence and unanswered questions. He retreated to the one place that felt like a true sanctuary, Xiao's house. There she, with an empathy that bypassed words, sensed his turmoil. She didn't press him with questions but shielded his pride with silent understanding, filling the space with her normal, comforting chatter about inconsequential things. Luang, desperately hoping for reconciliation and a second chance, arrived at Xiao's home not long after, his driver unloading an embarrassing pile of luxurious, impersonal gifts. He took Xiao aside, his voice earnest, asking her to help persuade Lang Cha to make him understand. Later, Xiao's own mother sat her down and painted a more sympathetic, if painful, picture of Luang's past. A passionate, stubborn young man who defied his wealthy family to start his own business, faced repeated, crushing failures, and was ultimately swallowed by shame, feeling he could not return empty-handed to the family he felt he had disappointed. While Xiao's mind could understand the narrative of hardship and pride, her heart, her entire loyalty, lay with the boy she had grown up with, the boy who had once waited on the cold stone staircase every evening for a month, watching the street for a father who never came. This familial drama unfolded concurrently with a burgeoning, and often hilariously misunderstood romantic rivalry. Zihan, observing from his desk the particular, soft-eyed care with which Lang Cha always regarded Xiao, the slight relaxation of his posture when she was near, mistakenly deciphered a formula. Xiao was Lang Cha's weakness. Therefore, surpassing Lang Cha, his white whale, must logically involve winning Xiao's affection. He thus began a clumsy, intellectually framed campaign to get closer to her, which Xiao, with her romantic, drama-fed imagination, utterly misinterpreted as the awkward, sweet signs of a shy boy's crush. This tragicomic misunderstanding led to the painfully, exquisitely awkward scenario of Zihan being invited to Xiao's house for a family dinner. Nervous, utterly out of his element in a bustling, noisy family setting, he became a sweaty, fidgeting spectacle, trying desperately to impress her parents by volunteering for dishes and loudly praising the daycare, his every move ringing with false notes. Lang Cha, present for the meal, could barely contain his simmering irritation, his cold, clipped remarks barely veiling his disdain. The entire evening devolved into a silent, ridiculous battle of one-upmanship witnessed by a bemused family and a completely clueless Xiao, who saw in Zihan's suffering only further endearing confirmation of his supposed devoted crush. This grand misconception led Xiao to reciprocate by inviting Zihan out on what he believed was a date, but which she saw as a friendly hangout. It resulted in a minor misadventure involving a territorial street cat and a wobbly park bench that left Zihan with a slight, heroic limp. They returned to her street just as Lang Cha watched from the upstairs window, his silhouette tense. His later warning that Zihan had ulterior, competitive motives fell on Xiao's deaf, romantically optimistic ears. "He likes me," she insisted with a confident smile, unable to see the complex chess game being played around her. The rivalry reached its peak of absurdity during a parent-teacher meeting. With Xiao's own parents absent due to work, Lang Cha's mother attended in their stead. She found herself seated directly next to Zihan's elegant, formidable, and socially ambitious mother. A subtle, hilariously pointed duel of polite conversation ensued, each woman expertly weaving boasts and anecdotes to establish which boy was closer, more essential to Xiao's life. The tension was at its peak when the homeroom teacher finally entered and made a routine announcement. Due to his grades, Zihan was being formally transferred to an elite science class, effective immediately. His mother, in her fervor, had spent the last 20 minutes passionately advocating for her son's interests in the wrong classroom. The deflation was palpable, the embarrassment profound, though she covered it with glacial composure as she gathered her designer handbag and made a stiff, silent exit. In the sun-drenched afternoon following the meetings, as students nervously awaited their domestic fates, Xiao remained blissfully, characteristically confident in her foster mother's unconditional protection. In a moment of idle, playful role-playing, a group of classmates began acting out how their parents behaved in the meetings. Zihan, energized by his growing, and now genuine feelings for Xiao, gave a lively self-deprecating performance of his own mother's dramatic flair, making Xiao burst into genuine melodic laughter. Lang Cha, however, remained withdrawn and quiet by the window, the fresh wound of his own father's first-ever awkward attendance still raw. Seeing his somber mood, Xiao, ever the sun trying to pierce his clouds, jumped into the performance. To cheer him, she decided to play the role of his mother. In her improvisation, she turned to an imaginary younger Lang Cha and said with comic gravitas, "Now son, be good. I'll go ask your father if he's having a hard time at work." The casual domestic use of husband in the scenario froze the real Lang Cha in place, a vivid blush creeping up his neck. The easy, intimate picture she painted of them as a unit, a family, was a glimpse of a shared future that felt both perfectly natural and utterly electrifying. Watching this intimate, playful exchange, seeing the unguarded look that passed between them, Zihan felt a sharp, unambiguous, and wholly unexpected pang of jealousy slice through him. It was a clear, undeniable signal that what had begun for him as a strategic move in a rivalry had, somewhere in the chaos, genuinely transformed into a heartfelt, complicated, and now deeply threatened affection. The stage was now definitively set, not for the simple continuance of a childhood friendship, but for a complex and heartfelt drama of love, loyalty, mistaken identity, and the painful, beautiful, often hilarious process of growing up and discovering where the heart truly resides. In the wake of their deeply personal, semi-public confrontation, the school's rumor mill, that ever-churning engine of adolescent drama, seized upon a new and tantalizing narrative. Whispers began to circulate, growing in detail and conviction with each retelling, that Xiao was not merely Lang Cha's childhood friend or adopted sister but his childhood fiancé, a promise made between families in their infancy. Faced with these elaborate, baseless tales, Xiao adopted a strategy of silent endurance. She saw no point in engaging with a fiction that had taken on a life of its own, especially when her own heart was a tangle of confusing signals. Her lifelong, seamless closeness with Lang Cha now existed in stark contrast to the persistent, gossip-fueled narrative of a romantic spark with Zihan, creating a duality that made her the inadvertent, and often uncomfortable, center of the school's attention. Though a part of her wanted to create distance from Lang Cha simply to escape the speculative whispers, their lives were too interwoven. Their paths crossed constantly after classes, in the hallways, by the lockers, each encounter a silent rebuttal to her attempted retreat and a quiet affirmation of their unbreakable bond. Academically, Xiao remained anchored in familiar, frustrating territory. When the latest exam rankings were posted, her name was, as usual, situated perilously close to the bottom, this time, a dismal fifth from last. Staring at the list, a wave of profound futility washed over her. Even in her most fantastical daydreams where she magically topped the class, she knew in her heart she could never truly rival Ye-jun, the brilliant, almost ethereal classmate who had been the object of her pure, unrequited childhood admiration. That early infatuation had crystallized into a symbol of everything she felt she was not: effortlessly excellent, composed, and worthy of admiration. Since her earliest school days, her academic foundation had been shaky, and now, no matter how many hours she spent hunched over her books, her progress felt infinitesimal, her results painfully limited. Noticing her despondent slump at her desk, Lang Cha's concern manifested not in platitudes but in quiet, decisive action. He slipped into an empty bathroom, his fingers flying over his phone's keyboard in a secret, strategic text to Ye-jun himself. He appealed to the boy's better nature, asking if he might offer Xiao a few words of genuine encouragement, not as a romantic gesture, but as a kindness from one high achiever to a struggling peer. The next day, Xiao's demeanor was transformed. She proudly showed her friends a small, carefully laminated note, a treasure containing the brief but precious words Ye-jun had written for her. It was a placebo of confidence, but it worked, momentarily lifting the cloud over her. Simultaneously, Zihan's life was veering onto an unexpected and glamorous path. His habit of singing absently in the school restroom, an outlet for his academic pressures, was overheard by a visiting talent scout. Impressed by the raw quality of his voice, the scout immediately extended an invitation to a competitive idol trainee program. However, this golden opportunity immediately highlighted Zihan's greatest weakness: a complete lack of rhythm and 2 left feet. Dancing was a foreign, humiliating language to him. In a moment of vulnerable honesty with Xiao, he confessed a deeper wound, a pervasive sense of living perpetually in Lang Cha's long, imposing shadow. This feeling of being a perpetual runner-up was a corrosive force, steadily eating away at his self-belief. To bolster him, Xiao offered a gift of intimate insight, a secret that leveled the playing field in her eyes. She leaned in and whispered that Lang Cha, for all his perfection, had a hilarious hidden flaw. Though he could carry a tune, his sense of rhythm was notoriously unreliable. He often sang comically offbeat when he thought no one was listening. This small, humanizing detail was a revelation to Zihan. It sparked genuine laughter, a release of tension, and a dawning realization. Xiao's lesson, imparted gently, was that everyone is a singular universe of strengths and quirks, not a copy to be measured against another. True confidence, she suggested, came from making peace with one's own unique flaws, not from erasing them. Time, indifferent to their struggles, marched inexorably forward, bringing with it the daunting specter of the National College entrance exam for Lang Cha. The night before the test, Xiao performed a solemn ritual, carefully tying a scarlet string for luck around his wrist, her fingers trembling slightly. She urged him to sleep early, promising solemnly not to disturb his rest. This resolve lasted approximately 5 minutes before she was tapping at his door, a torrent of anxious questions about exam tickets, pencils, and a dozen other trivial worries spilling out. With a mixture of fondness and exasperation, Lang Cha finally had to gently but firmly usher her out, closing the door on her fretful face. Their efforts bore fruit. Lang Cha's stellar scores earned him a place at the prestigious Yunhai University, where he enrolled in his dream major, information technology. This triumph, however, came with the bittersweet cost of physical separation from Xiao. For the first time, their daily rhythm was broken. Xiao had to navigate the strange quiet of life without his constant, steadying presence, while Zihan successfully passed his entertainment company's evaluation, preparing to depart for specialized training abroad, his path now diverging sharply toward the glittering world of arts and performance. At a small farewell gathering, Huan, ever the enthusiast, insisted on a commemorative group photo when she heard Zihan was going to be a star. It was the first time the 4 of them, Xiao, Lang Cha, Zihan, and Huan, were captured in a single frame. Yet in the resulting picture, Zihan's gaze seemed magnetically, helplessly drawn to Xiao, her image already an indelible etching in his memory. Walking her home afterwards, he found the courage for quiet gratitude. "Thank you," he said, "for always encouraging me." Xiao responded with a gentle, unambiguous smile. "I hope we'll always be friends," she stated, drawing a clear boundary he lacked the courage to cross. As he moved to hug her goodbye, a final, desperate impulse to confess rising within him, the moment was shattered by the insistent ring of Xiao's phone, a call from Lang Cha. The spell broken, Zihan retreated, his feelings forever unvoiced. Huan, pragmatic and sharp-eyed, had already charted her own course toward journalism, her passion for stories and truth a clear guiding light. Xiao, however, felt adrift. Returning to an emptier house, she received a text from Lang Cha. Not wanting to burden him with her melancholy, she forced cheer into her reply, suddenly remembering it was his birthday. She sent her wishes across the distance, hopping fiercely for his perpetual happiness, even if it unfolded far from her side. At Yunhai, Lang Cha was indeed building a new life. He had fallen in with a group of friendly, outgoing roommates who filled his days with boisterous camaraderie. When a call to Xiao went unanswered, they teased him mercilessly about his mysterious hometown girl, leaving him smiling an awkward private smile. Back in her familiar classroom, Xiao felt the weight of her uncertainty. Looking around, she saw peers feverishly preparing for their own futures, each with a target in sight, while she felt stuck in a formless limbo. In a moment of nostalgic wandering, she found herself in Lang Cha's old, now empty classroom. Standing by his former desk, she was inundated by memories of his quiet support, his patient explanations, his unwavering presence. She realized with a pang how profoundly she had come to rely on his dedication, how it had become the invisible scaffolding of her world. A soft, familiar cough from the doorway made her whirl around. Her heart leapt into her throat. There stood Lang Cha himself, having made the journey back just for her. A storm of surprise and joy rendered her momentarily speechless. He had returned with a mission to reignite her sense of purpose. Gently, he reminded her that her oldest, most consistent goal had been set in kindergarten, to go to school alongside him every single day. The memory, vivid and warm, flooded back, rekindling a forgotten ember of motivation. Then, his tone turning serious, he posed the question directly. Did she want to take the entrance exam for Yunhai University? Her response was a burst of conflicted desire. I really want to, but I feel like I can't. He refused her doubt. Don't overthink, he soothed. Set the goal, move toward it bravely. I'll be waiting for you at Yunhai. The promise was a lifeline. Remembering it was still his birthday, she dashed to a local bakery, only to find it closed, leaving her with a solitary, slightly sad-looking mini cake. As they shared it under the evening sky, a brilliant shooting star traced a silent arc above them. Moved by the beauty in the moment, Xiao instinctively reached for his hand. As they watched the celestial streak, Lang Cha, his heart full to bursting with a love nurtured since childhood, gathered his courage to finally speak the words he'd held back for years. But the moment his lips parted, Xiao, overwhelmed by a sudden, inexplicable panic, pushed his hand away and fled, leaving him standing alone, bewildered and ankle-deep in a forgotten puddle. The scene rewinds to 2 weeks prior to the crucible of Xiao's own entrance exam. Lang Cha had arranged for leave from university to personally escort her. On the way to the testing center, disaster struck in the form of a misplaced step into fresh dog waste. For Lang Cha, the scene was a familiar callback to their childhood dynamic. Without a word of complaint, he calmly knelt on the pavement. Hold still, he instructed softly, and meticulously cleaned her shoe. Still unsatisfied, he insisted she wear his own pristine sneakers, determined that nothing, not even foul luck, would distract her as she stepped into the arena that would shape her future. Emerging from the exam hall hours later, her heart was a frantic drum against her ribs, but her eyes held a new, steely glint of hope. In that pressured silence, she felt a shift within herself, an instant of maturation. 3 years of high school had vanished like a long, poignant dream, a one-way train journey through the landscape of youth with no return tickets. The results, when they came, reflected both triumph and the stubborn reality of her academic history. She had achieved the highest score of her high school career, a monumental personal victory, yet it still fell agonizingly short of Yunhai's standard cutoff for her desired major. Studying the numbers, Lang Cha, ever the strategist, gently pointed her toward a new avenue, Yunhai's recently launched journalism program. As a new major, its admission standards were more flexible. While her family debated safer options at local colleges, Xiao, in a quiet moment of introspection, made her first major, independent life decision. She would apply to Yunhai. In the days following, a comedy of errors and intimacy unfolded. After accidentally pushing Lang Cha into a river during an outing, an act of playful retaliation gone wrong, she spent a week racked with guilt over the cold she had caused him. Seeking to apologize, she crept into his room as he showered, only to lose her nerve and hide under his bed. This led to the profoundly awkward situation of her witnessing him change, and him, with unnerving calm, asking how long she planned to stay beneath his furniture before pulling her out. Flustered, she asked how he'd known. He simply smiled and pointed to her brightly colored slippers, clearly visible in the shadow of the bed frame. If you're going to be sneaky, he teased, remember to hide the evidence. His lightheartedness did little to calm her worry over his health, but as she fretted aloud, he stepped suddenly closer. The proximity was electrifying, sending her heart into a wild gallop and painting her cheeks crimson. With a strangled gasp, she turned and fled, leaving behind only the echo of his low, self-satisfied chuckle. Finally, autumn arrived, carrying Xiao to the gates of Yunhai University. Her heart swelled with excitement as she hauled her luggage toward her new dorm, a symbol of her hard-won independence. Swinging the door open, she froze. Inside, already unpacking, was the unmistakable, beloved face of Juan. Their simultaneous shrieks of joy shook the room as they embraced, marveling at fate's whimsy. Juan, it turned out, had missed the cutoff for her first-choice major elsewhere and had also landed in Yunhai's journalism program. The coincidence was staggering. They were not only at the same university in the same major but also roommates. Their jubilant celebration was interrupted by the arrival of their third roommate, a serious, studious girl named Ling, who eyed their boisterous reunion with thinly veiled exasperation. Soon after, Ling found her own kindred spirit in a classically trained dancer, and thus, the legendary, chaotic sisterhood of dorm room 404 was born, quickly becoming a notable entity on the freshman scene. Their notoriety caught the attention of a senior who was escorting Ling back from orientation. This senior, lively and mischievous, immediately invited the whole 404 crew to a freshman social event. Unbeknownst to Xiao, this senior was also Lang Cha's university roommate. At the gathering, still smarting from a recent teasing by Lang Cha, Xiao pointedly ignored him, pretending he was a stranger. The table's atmosphere, however, was vibrant. Lang Cha's roommate, enjoying the drama, began to gossip, joking that since enrollment, Lang Cha had shown zero interest in any female student, leading some to speculate about his sexuality. The table erupted in laughter while Lang Cha remained an island of silent amusement. His effortless, indulgent attention toward Xiao, refilling her drink, subtly guiding a dish toward her, did not escape the senior's notice. He leaned in, half joking, half serious, warning the girls at the table to keep their distance. "Our Lang Cha here," he announced dramatically, "has a very special older sister from childhood. Anyone getting too close is walking into a world of trouble." The table roared again while Juan watched the entire scene unfold, struggling to contain her knowing laughter. As the evening wore on, the seniors proposed a drinking game with simple, perilous rules. The loser had to perform a dare. Predictably, Xiao, with her slow processing speed for such games, lost the first round. Her punishment was to ask a random boy in the cafeteria for his phone number. Blushing furiously and protesting that she knew no one, she was propelled forward by a chorus of encouraging whoops. Taking a deep, steadying breath, she approached a pleasant-looking boy sitting alone. He quickly grasped the situation, grinned, and cheerfully recited his number, playing along to save her from further embarrassment. Xiao nodded, mumbled her thanks, and scurried back, her face aflame. This entire scene, however, played out under Lang Cha's watchful gaze. A strange, unsettling cocktail of discomfort, jealousy, and irritation, emotions he seldom entertained, began to simmer within him. The feeling intensified when Xiao's phone died and the helpful stranger, in a gesture that seemed impossibly intimate to Lang Cha, took her hand and wrote his number directly on her palm. Seeing the digits inscribed on her skin was the final straw. Lang Cha abruptly pretended a sudden deep intoxication, slumping dramatically and drawing all attention, especially Xiao's, toward himself. He then shot a meaningful look at his friend Guang, who instantly grasped the unspoken request. Feigning a stomach ache, Guang announced he had to escort another underclassman back, and on his way out, deftly nudged Xiao toward the helplessly drunk Lang Cha. "You should probably help him back," Guang suggested with false concern. "He lives in your dorm direction." The walk back was a masterclass in subtle manipulation. Lang Cha leaned heavily on Xiao, his steps a convincing stagger. In the process, his hand accidentally closed over hers, and with a few seemingly clumsy swipes of his thumb, he smudged the offending phone number into an illegible smear on her skin. The gesture, so deliberate yet disguised as happenstance, left Xiao stunned. Her heart hammered against her ribs, her face burned, and a confusing warmth spread through her. Under the dim, golden glow of the campus pathway lights, their elongated shadows wobbled and merged into one. As they neared her dorm, the charged atmosphere peaked. Flustered, Xiao blurted out, "W, what are you trying to do?" Lang Cha, his voice low and close to her ear, simply murmured, "Just warning you to be careful of the bikes behind you." The sheer incongruity of the romantic tension and his mundane excuse left her utterly addled. She watched, heart still racing, as a sly, knowing smile touched his lips before she finally turned and rushed into the safety of her building. Determined to prevent any further helpful strangers from entering the picture, Lang Cha decided it was time to abandon subtlety. However, as a romantic novice, he was utterly out of his depth. He convened a strategic council with his three roommates around their makeshift mahjong table, treating courtship like a complex problem in his coding class. They brainstormed with intense focus. Following their initial advice, Lang Cha arrived at Xiao's dorm with a large bouquet and a bag of her favorite snacks, his heart pounding with rehearsed lines. Xiao, however, comfortable in her pajamas and engrossed in a drama, refused to come downstairs. She merely lowered a basket from her balcony and told him to put the items inside himself. Deflated, Lang Cha placed the flowers in the basket and watched as it was hauled up, his grand confession plan dying before it was born. Back in his dorm, a post-mortem analysis was conducted. His roommates concluded that Xiao was an irregular variable who could not be won by conventional romantic scripts. The key, they theorized, was to create a sense of novelty and intellectual surprise. One roommate suggested a magic trick confession. Though another critiqued it as cliché, Lang Cha seized upon the idea with the zeal of a new academic pursuit. Under a crash course from his most theatrical roommate, he practiced card sleights and flourishes with the same intensity he applied to complex algorithms. After days of relentless practice, he deemed himself ready. He intercepted Xiao on campus, and with a magician's flourish presented a deck with specially marked cards, his eyes alight with anticipation. Xiao examined the cards with deep, genuine concentration for a long minute. Finally, she looked up and declared, puzzled, "I think you just don't know how to shuffle properly." Lang Cha's confident smile dissolved. His path to her heart, it seemed, was strewn with uniquely Xiao-shaped obstacles. He returned to his dorm in defeat, where his disciples collectively admitted their theories had failed. For Xiao's upcoming birthday, they devised a simpler, grander plan. Lang Cha enlisted Huan to lure Xiao to the university's main gate under a pretext. Xiao, sensing conspiracy in Huan's overly casual demeanor, was peppering her with questions when suddenly, all the lights on the surrounding campus buildings winked out. A digital countdown ignited high on the facade of the library. As it hit 0, Lang Cha stepped from the shadows, illuminated by a single spotlight. He walked toward her, confidence replaced by a raw, vulnerable sincerity, and placed a small, carefully wrapped gift in her hands. It was a locket containing a tiny photo from their first day of kindergarten together. This was the 18th birthday they had celebrated side by side, from awkward infancy to this precipice of adulthood. They had navigated every twist and turn of youth together, and without either fully realizing it, an ordinary affection had quietly, irrevocably, bloomed into something extraordinary. Back in her dorm, Xiao's mind was a whirlwind. She replayed Lang Cha's recent behavior, the protective jealousy, the failed magic, the grand gesture, and the truth finally crystallized. These were not the acts of a brother, but the clumsy, heartfelt attempts at a confession. She also had to confront the tumultuous, unusual emotions stirring within her own heart, feelings she was terrified to name. Seeking anonymous counsel, she poured their entire story into a post on a university forum, disguising details but laying bare the emotional core. Overnight, the post exploded. The consensus was unanimous and deafening. "If this isn't love, then nothing is." The comments felt like arrows striking directly at the truth she had been hiding from. Before she could process this digital verdict, real-life drama intervened. An arrogant, entitled senior, the campus heartthrob, had become obsessed with Xiao after misinterpreting her general friendliness. Having orchestrated a situation to get her alone in a locked seminar room, he was attempting to force his intentions on her when the door burst open. An enraged Lang Cha, informed by a vigilant Huan, stood in the doorway, his eyes burning with a cold fury. With a swift, precise movement born of controlled rage, not brawling, he neutralized the threat. Without a glance at the stunned onlookers, he took Xiao's hand and led her away. Later, using his standing and evidence gathered, Lang Cha had the senior formally removed from a key competition and publicly exposed, ensuring his protection of Xiao was both personal and principled. In the aftermath, their bond felt forged in something stronger than childhood habit. It was during this time that Lang Cha, through a friend who frequented the forum, accidentally discovered Xiao's anonymous post. Reading her words, her confession of liking him, flooded him with a shy, profound warmth. The next day, he invited her to dinner and over dessert asked her to be his partner in a 2-day, one-night citywide puzzle competition, a shared challenge that was their version of a first date. Xiao, nervous and blushing, accepted. Their friends, hearing they were going away together, erupted in suggestive glee, offering supplies with exaggerated winks, much to Xiao's mortification. Upon arriving at the competition hotel, an initial awkwardness settled between them. To break it, Lang Cha suggested exploring the famous night market. After changing, they met in the lobby, where Xiao, having made a slight effort with her appearance, rendered Lang Cha so flustered he could barely meet her eyes. Their walk through the bustling food street was a dance of accidental closeness, culminating in Xiao being jostled by the crowd and Lang Cha catching her, holding her steady against him for a moment where their heartbeats seemed to synchronize. Overwhelmed, Xiao pushed away and fled back to the hotel. In her room, she discovered Huan had sneakily packed a set of decidedly non-platonic silky pajamas in her bag. As she was fuming at this betrayal, a soft knock came at her door. It was Lang Cha, wearing a convincingly apologetic expression, explaining the kettle in his room was broken and asking if he could boil water in hers. She let him in, hastily hiding the offending pajamas. While the water heated, he noticed her hair was still damp from her earlier shower. Wordlessly, he took a towel and began to dry it for her, his movements gentle. The room was thick with a romantic tension so palpable it was almost a third presence. As Xiao made a move to stand, they tangled and tumbled to the floor together. In that quiet, charged moment lying amid the soft carpet, Lang Cha finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "Xiao, do you want to stay by my side?" Her answer when it came was pure Xiao. She set a condition. He had to wait until the next day when she won first place in the competition. It was her way of saying yes. Thus, the two childhood friends who had shared a life from infancy officially began a secret romance. In the familiar comfort of his room during a visit home, Xiao tried to wake a supposedly sleeping Lang Cha. Seizing the opportunity, she decided to give him a makeover with her cosmetics. Just as she was applying the final comical touch and attempting to sneak away, his arm shot out and pulled her firmly into an embrace, tumbling her onto the bed beside him. Just as their faces were inches apart, his mother's voice boomed from down the hall, threatening to come in and drag him out of bed if he didn't get up. Xiao panicked, whispering frantic warnings to keep their new relationship a secret. Lang Cha could only sigh, the promise of a kiss once again postponed by the realities of their intertwined, family-dominated lives. The next morning at breakfast, Lang Cha's mother observed two telling details. Xiao's fingerprint could unlock her son's phone, and their casual, comfortable interactions carried a new, sweetly secretive undertone. A slow, knowing smile spread across her face. Her future daughter-in-law, she realized with delight, was already firmly in place. To maintain their secret in their tightly knit neighborhood, their romance became a series of stolen, discreet moments, brief walks, hushed conversations in the garden, texts sent from behind their own bedroom windows. Lang Cha complained half-seriously that even with her home for summer break, they had no real privacy. He argued for making their relationship public, but Xiao worried about her traditional father's potential reaction and urged patience. Seeing the flicker of hurt in his eyes, she relented, leaning in to give him a quick, sweet kiss. A small, secret treasure to hold him over, a promise of more to come in their slowly unfolding future. The tension in the room dissolved as Lang Cha, overcome by a wave of affection and possessiveness, closed the distance between them and pulled Xiao firmly into his embrace, a silent declaration that spoke louder than any argument. This intimate tableau, however, was not the only domestic scene unfolding. Back in their neighborhood, the two mothers, having long orchestrated their children's closeness from the sidelines, raised their teacups in a private, celebratory toast. They were fully aware of the young couple's secret romance and their specific fear of Xiao's traditionally strict father's disapproval. Eager to accelerate matters and create the perfect opportunity for the relationship to solidify away from prying eyes, the mothers hatched a clever conspiracy. They planned a joint family trip, a ruse to get both households out of town. The execution was swift and decisive. Xiao's father, blissfully unaware of the matchmaking plot, found himself bundled into a vehicle almost before he could voice a question, whisked away on a supposed holiday. With the parental oversight temporarily removed, Lang Cha's spirit soared. He immediately began drafting elaborate plans for a series of long-awaited, uninterrupted dates, envisioning a perfect stretch of romantic privacy. To his chagrin, Xiao's schedule in the ensuing days became unexpectedly and maddeningly congested, her calendar filling with a whirlwind of obligations that rivaled a head of state's itinerary. The first day was claimed by a surprise visit from an out-of-town cousin. The second was consumed by a mandatory social internship with her university friends. The third saw an influx of more relatives paying a call. Lang Cha, left with no alternative, was forced to bide his time at home, attempting to channel his frustration into meticulous hairstyling and lines of complex code, all the while nursing the forlorn hope that his girlfriend might remember she had a boyfriend waiting in the wings. Finally, a window seemed to open. Believing his turn had at last arrived, Lang Cha prepared for their date only to be met with another disappointment. Xiao, it seemed, had already made plans to go to the movies with her best friend Huan. The sting of rejection was sharp, mingling sadness with frustration. Yet demonstrating a patience he was learning to cultivate, Lang Cha swallowed his pride and affectionately let her go, not wanting to be the source of conflict. At the cinema, Xiao's surprise was palpable when she saw Huan arrive hand-in-hand with her own boyfriend. The realization dawned that she had been set up as an unwitting third wheel, a mere light source for the established couple's date. For 2 long hours, she sat in the dim theater, feeling increasingly foolish and impatient. The moment the credits rolled, she rushed home, her heart heavy with the wasted evening. As she turned the corner onto her street, her breath caught. There, waiting under the glow of a street lamp, was Lang Cha. His expression was unreadable, a mixture of hurt and resolve. He revealed that a classmate had seen her at the movies and sent him photos. The visual evidence, though innocent in context, fed his growing insecurity. The words poured out in a pained torrent. He felt excluded from her life, questioning whether he was somehow unworthy or if her feelings for him had never been genuine. Xiao, weary and frustrated by the misunderstanding, could only sigh, lacking the energy for a lengthy explanation in that moment. A cold, heavy silence descended between them, both retreating into their own sulking hurt. Seeking solace and validation, Lang Cha turned to his friend Guang to complain about his unreasonable girlfriend. Instead of blind sympathy, Guang offered a mirror, gently pointing out areas where Lang Cha's own expectations and communication might need maturity. It was a sobering moment of introspection. He realized that being in love also meant learning how to grow up. Meanwhile, Xiao, alone in her room, was besieged by regret. Replaying the argument, she recognized the pain in his words and her own dismissive reaction. Resolved to make amends, she headed to his house to apologize. As she opened her own door to leave, she found him already standing there, a mirror of her own intention. He offered a flimsy excuse about forgotten keys, claiming he'd be left to wander the streets if she didn't let him in. The standoff broke into soft laughter and they sat together, their apologies tumbling out simultaneously. Lang Cha expressed his heartfelt longing for their precious alone time, confessing how he dreamed of lazy breakfasts and shared moments during the parental reprieve, none of which had materialized. Xiao, touched by his vulnerability, made a sincere promise to be more mindful of her role as his girlfriend and to consciously include him in her plans. It must be said that their reconciliations possessed a lightning-fast quality, and this small, painful clash ultimately served to deepen their appreciation for the fragile, new bond they were building. Their renewed closeness, however, was not destined to remain secret for long. Thanks to a father's almost supernatural sixth sense, Xiao's dad grew suspicious of a stranger he thought was loitering near their home. Cutting his trip short, he rushed back, literally leaping from the still-moving car in his haste. From behind, Lang Cha's mother shouted frantic, unheeded warnings to her son, but the two young lovers, lost in their own private haze, were deaf to the world. Their focus was entirely on each other. Xiao, noticing a key glittering in Lang Cha's pocket, intuitively understood his hopeful intentions. As they leaned in, the atmosphere thickening with the promise of a long-awaited, passionate kiss, the door suddenly burst open, revealing the very familiar and very shocked face of Xiao's father. The initial shock and fear were monumental, but what followed was a gradual, heartfelt acceptance. The families, having been intertwined for a lifetime, could not long resist the obvious truth and genuine affection between their children. The relationship, once a secret, now had the blessing of home. As Xiao navigated her journalism internship, her integrity was put to the test. She witnessed a traffic incident where a young man on a motorcycle collided with an elderly woman who then exaggerated her injuries. While public sentiment swiftly condemned the rider, Xiao, acting on her journalistic instincts, had captured the truth on video. She courageously released the footage, clearing the motorcyclist's name. The grateful young man, Xin Yo, sought to thank her with a meal, but Xiao politely declined, her thoughts already racing toward Lang Cha. Undaunted, Xin Yo embarked on a persistent and very public campaign of admiration. The next morning, he blockaded the entrance to her dorm with a mountain of bubble tea cups. Embarrassed by the spectacle and unable to refuse gracefully, Xiao hauled the sugary bounty back to her room. That evening, as she prepared for bed, she heard her name being called from the courtyard below. Peering out, she saw Xin Yo and rushed down, desperate to avert another scene. He smiled warmly, proclaiming that the seat on his motorcycle would forever be reserved for her. In a bold move, he snatched the small hair tie from her wrist, proposing to trade it for a romantic promise. As onlookers cheered, Xiao was mortified. She firmly stopped him, stating clearly that she already had a boyfriend. Xin Yo, however, remained brazenly undeterred. The commotion drew a crowd, including some of Lang Cha's juniors and the eagerly watching girls from Xiao's dorm. At that precise moment, Lang Cha arrived. His gaze instantly sharpened, zeroing in on the man daring to encroach on his territory. The following days saw Xin Yo's efforts intensify, waiting to drive her to class, bringing breakfast, all of which Xiao firmly rejected. When he teased that perhaps her boyfriend thought she gained weight, she retorted sharply that her figure was none of his concern. His third-party interference was undeniably top-tier in its relentless audacity. When Lang Cha arrived to pick her up, Xiao seized the moment for a definitive introduction, casually presenting Xin Yo to her boyfriend. Xin Yo extended a hand in greeting, which Lang Cha pointedly ignored, simply taking Xiao's hand and leading her away. As they left, Xin Yo called after them, announcing that his pursuit was only just beginning. No sooner had they escaped that drama than Xiao's phone buzzed with messages from other male classmates. Exasperated, she hurried after Lang Cha to explain they were merely juniors from her department seeking academic help. In a sudden move, Lang Cha stopped short, causing her to bump into him. Seizing the opportunity, he pulled her tightly into his arms right there in the middle of the pathway, a public and unequivocal assertion of his claim. Jealousy, it seemed, had a way of stripping away his usual reserve, leading to irrational and openly affectionate displays. After this passionate public declaration, the air between them crackled with unresolved tension and emotion. Flustered by his boldness and the surrounding attention, Xiao eventually calmed as he led her away, not to a romantic cafe but to a furniture store. Watching her marvel at home decor, a vision of their shared future filled him with profound hope. In a decisive move, Lang Cha, who normally shunned social media, decided to make their relationship unequivocally public. He posted a photo of them together for the entire world to see. Unbeknownst to him, in a fit of mischievous pique or perhaps to maximize the surprise, he had inexplicably blocked Xiao on the platform. When she returned to her dorm, an excited Juan dragged her aside to talk about the post. Puzzled, Xiao checked her own phone and saw nothing. Borrowing a friend's device, the truth revealed itself: a beautiful, official post, and she was blocked from viewing it. A wave of fury washed over her. She didn't understand his reasoning. As his girlfriend, she deserved to share in this moment, not be excluded from it. The combination of a public declaration and a private block felt like a bewildering betrayal. Determined to confront him, she stormed out. This romantic crisis unfolded against the backdrop of ongoing rivalry. Lang Cha's friends, alarmed by Shin Yo's relentless pursuit, had convened a strategic meeting. Their advice was clear: combat emotion with emotion. Create romance, assert his claims subtly but firmly, and crucially, learn to show vulnerability to soften Xiao's heart. The next morning, as both suitors appeared outside the girls' dorm, a competitive tension hung thick in the air. It was then that a furious Xiao emerged, marching straight up to Lang Cha to demand an explanation for the social media block. Seeing them argue, Shin Yo saw an opening and taunted, "About to break up?" Xiao's expression was pure thunder. But Lang Cha, instead of arguing back, disarmed her completely. He apologized sincerely, explaining his actions were a clumsy attempt to prove the depth of his feelings to the world, because he loved her so profoundly. His vulnerable confession left Xiao emotionally disarmed and Shinyo feeling distinctly like an outsider. Embarrassed by the charged public scene, Xiao quickly pulled Lang Cha away. He led her to a surprise, a new beautifully decorated apartment, styled entirely to her tastes. Handing her the keys, he invited her to stay there during her upcoming internship. As they lingered in the space that symbolized their future, a warm, intimate atmosphere enveloped them. Xiao took out her phone, and this time together they posted a joint photo. Witnessing this united front, Shin Yo finally understood the immovable bond between them and wisely withdrew. A year later, Xiao began her challenging internship at Yunhai Television as an editorial assistant. Despite the title, she was relegated to the margins, printing documents, fetching coffee, and watching as interview opportunities were doled out to those with connections. Feeling oppressed and disillusioned, she found solace in a surprising discovery. Lang Cha, her paragon of success, confessed to having faced 7 significant failures in his own career, including 4 failed bids that had pushed his company into crisis. Seeing this humanizing vulnerability in her seemingly infallible boyfriend was oddly comforting. It meant his brilliance, too, could be temporarily dimmed by setbacks. As her final internship evaluation loomed, Xiao decided to take a monumental risk. She secured an interview with the rising star Yejun. The segment was a sensational success, achieving ratings far beyond those of her well-connected peers. Yet, in a bitter twist, her supervisor, citing an unfair broadcast slot, demanded she redo the evaluation. Overwhelmed by injustice, Xiao impulsively declared she would outperform everyone with a second, even better interview, a promise she immediately regretted as she faced the daunting task with less than 10 days to prepare. Lang Cha, ever her anchor, suggested with playful bravery that she simply interview him, lightening her burden with his support. In a separate, more intimate setting, Lang Cha, hoping to keep Xiao close, secretly locked the door to his apartment. Faced with a single bed, Xiao grew flustered, worrying about where he would sleep. He replied with a teasing question about sharing, which she countered by stating the bed was too small. Realizing escape was impossible, she curled into a tight, nervous ball. Lang Cha, amused by her adorable anxiety, continued to tease her. When he mentioned there was only one blanket, she accused him of planning to let her freeze. Summoning her courage, she finally lifted the covers and told him to come over. He gently reassured her, whispering that what he truly desired was their long-term future together, easing her tension. Then, in a sudden mischievous shift, she pressed close and asked a blunt, personal question about a minor childhood surgery of his she'd accidentally discovered. Lang Cha, mock outraged, clenched a fist and vowed to teach her a lesson someday for her audacity. Xiao, carelessly playing with fire, only moved closer, pleading for a hug. Lang Cha, his restraint fraying, warned her not to hold him so tightly, his voice low with desire as he admitted that his inaction was not due to a lack of wanting. The next day at the television station, Xiao overheard condescending colleagues mocking her as flirtatious and inexperienced. Calmly, she took out her phone and announced her next interview subject, the internationally popular idol Zihan, who was returning to the country for a tour. Skeptical peers warned her not to aim too high, but to their astonishment, Zihan agreed. The interview was a triumph, with Zihan offering her deliberate, public support in front of the chief director, fundamentally altering the leadership's perception of her. Afterward, Xiao invited Zihan to her home as a friend. He cooked a meal for them and they reminisced about their school days. Zihan thanked her for the encouragement she'd given him long ago, crediting it for his courage to pursue his dreams. Xiao was then reminded of a recent interview where Zihan, asked about his ideal type, described someone ordinary who loved snacks, had a simple smile, and was hopeless at math no matter how it was explained, a description that resonated with a haunting familiarity. Meanwhile, domestic life was hurtling forward. Lang Cha's parents, overjoyed by the stable relationship, began openly discussing marriage, moving with a speed that left Xiao slightly dizzy. She was, it seemed, on the fast track to becoming their official daughter-in-law. During a family gathering, as they sorted through old belongings, Xiao happily claimed a box of Lang Cha's childhood trophies as her own, playfully declaring that his achievements were hers too. Lang Cha, in a quiet, significant moment, replaced an old family photo on the wall with a new one, prompting his mother to immediately call her future daughter-in-law over to be in the picture. That evening, Lang Cha and Xiao took a long, nostalgic walk through their old neighborhood, retracing the steps of their shared history. They passed the grocery store where young Xiao had snatched a flower from him and in her excitement run straight into a tree. They remembered the time she'd torn her pants trying to outrun him, and he'd stood guard to shield her from view, only for both to be scolded later. They laughed about the Japanese skewer she'd coveted, which had tumbled to the ground in their struggle, making her forever cautious with that particular snack. Every childhood mischief of hers had somehow become a clean-up duty for him. Amidst these floods of memory, with the giant Ferris wheel painting a circle of light against the night sky, Lang Cha stopped. He turned to Xiao, his eyes serious and full of a love that had grown and deepened over a lifetime. There, surrounded by the ghosts of their past selves, he dropped to one knee and with a sincerity born of knowing every part of her asked her to marry him. It was the ultimate affirmation, a promise to turn their intertwined past into a deliberate, shared future.